you shouldn't have listened.
In the snow of my backyard were footprints that circled the house 3 times. Bare. Perfect. And when I stepped out to look, they circled 4. I'm Nora. Suburbs outside Flagstaff. Snowmelt season. Power cut at 1:11. Moon bright as bone. The dogs started whining at the back door, not barking, whining like apology. When I looked out, the yard was smooth except for the tracks. Small feet, child-sized, walking clockwise around the house. No start, no end, just the loop. I took my phone flashlight, stepped out, counted them once. 73 prints, dry around the edges. On the 3rd loop, 1 pair of prints broke off and came straight toward me. They stopped 6 inches from my boots. The last toe print was still filling with meltwater as if pressed seconds ago. I turned back inside. The door had locked itself. Inside, the temperature fell hard enough to fog the windows from within. Through the kitchen glass, the yard now showed 2 loops, an inner and outer ring, and between them something had dragged a small stick like a compass arm, cutting a line through snow, precise as a drawing. At 1:29, my phone camera opened by itself, front lens on, recording. For half a second before it crashed, the screen showed me standing at the window, and a small, gray-skinned child standing behind me, mouth open, eyes like holes punched in paper. When I turned, only kitchen light and the sound of melting. Then from outside a knock came, low, wooden, not door, more like knuckles on the siding. 3 times. Then again from a different wall, following the house. I stayed until dawn in the laundry room with every light on. The next day, the yard was untouched except for a single set of prints leading to my window and stopping under it, facing in. I salted the perimeter. Still, sometimes, after midnight, I find melted ovals under the eaves, drying slower than weather allows. The ferry horn didn't blow when the clock hit departure. The water under the bow tapped the hull in 3s like knuckles on a door. I'm Kat, night crew on the Graveson run. We keep the deck swept, coffee hot, and tourists from doing dumb things. Blackout put the island out. We ran on emergency strips and habit. At 1:04, a kid's life ring dropped itself off the peg and rolled in a perfect circle until it touched my boot. No wind. The line attached to it quivered not from motion, but from something holding the other end and letting go. I looped it back and the peg was warm like it had been gripped. Windows fogged from the inside as if a group of people had leaned to watch the dark. I wiped one and made a circle. A second circle grew from the outside, then slid sideways like a face trying to follow mine. In the glass, the black water gathered into a hole darker than black, a shape that didn't reflect our safety lights, only drank them. At 1:12, the door to the forward lounge unlatched exactly as your hand would do it to be quiet. Inside, the bolt handle settled back to center by itself, polite, like it had heard me. On the carpet, wet footprints appeared one by one from the threshold to the row of benches, narrow, long, no arc at heel, just a steady press like the ball of a hand. The vending machine hummed to life, no power, and the coil with bottled water twitched a notch. Through the glass, I saw my reflection and a second person standing a head taller, not beside but behind my shoulder, tilted as if listening for tide. The bottle dropped and hit the tray with a sound like a throat being cleared. Down on the car deck, chains ticked twice against themselves. The ramp was up. Nothing should move. I walked the lanes. In the condensation on a hood, a forehead oval sat exactly where a face would rest to watch the river under our steel. When I touched the metal, it gave back heat in a circle that fit my palm as if an answer. 3 slow knocks came from under the bow in rhythm with nothing I know. Tap, tap, tap. Pause. Tap, tap, tap. The hull is a wall. Still. The deck under my feet softened a fraction, the way wood does when someone on the other side leans their weight. The water grabbed light and threw none of it back. I told myself, logs in the current, then remembered the current was slack. A slick handprint rose on the inside of the observation window at toddler height. 5 oval patches of transparency swelling and shrinking like gills. Another print, higher, slid down a foot and stopped. Thumb too low, as if the idea of a thumb disagreed with anatomy. The horn finally gave one long, the sound thin like it had been pulled through cloth. We didn't move. The captain came over the speaker and said nothing. The microphone stayed open and you could hear a breath not synced with anyone on board. In, out. In the corner of the lounge, a life jacket inflated a little and settled, as if a chest remembered. The next morning, the deck paint held wet shapes that had dried to salt, tight arcs like toes, each the length of my thumb, leading from rail to rail and then over, stopping where air stops. I ride the run still. When we hit the middle channel at night, the water sometimes knocks so politely you want to apologize for not letting it in. Every kennel looked to the same empty bit of hallway and wagged at nothing. Then the leashes lifted off their hooks and stretched tight as if someone were walking them. I'm Reese, overnight at the county animal shelter. We run fans to keep air moving and radios low to keep us human. The power drop made the place hear itself. At 12:06, the dogs went silent all at once, the kind of quiet that isn't peace. A second later, they all turned their heads to the gap between Kennel H and Supply, and several tails thumped the bars like a signal. No one stood there. The smell in the aisle changed the way air does when a door you can't see opens. I talked waters. In the stainless, I saw breath ovals rise and fade above the bowls. Not mine. Spaced like somebody small was pacing their thirst. A puppy's bowl slid an inch and stopped against my boot, as if pushed nose first by nothing. The pup wagged harder at that patch of hall and did the little hop my own dog does when my partner comes home. At 12:19, the leash hooks on the wall lifted one by one. Nylon ran through the rings straight out, pulling taut into the aisle at the perfect height for a person's hand. The carabiners clicked closed around nothing and hung suspended. Then every clip relaxed at once and fell back to the tile in a soft rain sound of metal kissing grit. I kept moving because if you stop moving, you notice you're scared. In Cat A, all the eyes tracked the air to the same corner. The laser pointer I keep for exercise beamed on in my apron pocket, no finger, red dots skittering along the floor to the empty door frame. When I grabbed it, the lens was warm like it had been under a cheek. Back in Kennel E, a bed flattened under invisible weight, the foam exhaling like its memory foam remembered someone it loved. A dog in the next run did that soft whine they do when they smell a kid. On the clipboard, a note had written itself in block print, not like any of my coworkers. Good dog, in the space where we record meds. The air went cold along my forearm, exactly where a leash would brush if someone walked a dog next to me. The loose end tapped my hand lightly in a perfect wag beat, and my palm warmed as if a tongue had pressed there. The floor recorded it, 5 faint prints in a trail of wet that began nowhere and stopped at the drain. At 12:37, the dryer and grooming ran and then stopped, leaving the window fogged. A handprint showed on the inside, tiny, not a human proportion though, pads more than fingers, then expanded into a human hand size and slid down as if a child had changed form and was learning. The radio at reception whispered names I knew the sound of. Bingo, Daisy, Ruthie, dogs that went last month. Then my own dog's name in a voice no living person has. I opened the back door because the stall smell of ghost sorrow is worse than actual air. Outside the chain link, frost on the cement carried a clean paw print too big for our guests. Pads long, claws not where claws go. It melted slower than ice should under night. The wind chime we never hung rung one delicate note. When the grid woke, the dogs did too. Good, loud chaos. Later I checked the camera. Every frame shows me walking empty leashes around the aisle at a steady pace while the dogs heal perfectly to nothing. I still take overnights. Sometimes the leash I'm holding rises a few inches and pulls gentle, and I say easy because manners don't stop with meat. The mannequins faced the exit at closing. In the morning, clipped their heads or turned toward my office, and the floor dust shows heel marks where plastic can't walk. I'm Jax, caretaker at Crestview Mall, dead half the week, barely alive for Sunday sales. The blackout took the skylights from suggestion to void. All that was left was the hum of the emergency beacons and my breath. At 10:08, I walked the concourse past the shuttered shops. The shoe store gate banged softly from inside, no draft, but the old coiled cable on the gate was vibrating, transmitting nothing. In the reflection of the plate glass, I saw my back and a second figure a shoulder taller matching my pace, just 6 feet behind, then not. The center court fountain was drained years ago. That night, the dry basin wore a perfect ring of wet the size of the original pool, and a line across the ring like a skater had traced a slow arc. I touched the marble lip. It was warm, circle-wide like a body had leaned along it. The escalator stood dead. Its metal treads shivered as if someone walked down carefully. With each shiver, a single step clicked one notch as if trying to descend without power. I told myself settling, then watched a handprint appear on the polished rail, slide down and lift at elbow height. The rubber kept the heat. At 10:22, the old music system coughed a bar, the same 4 notes you hear when a carousel starts, then quit. The carousel's horses haven't moved since 2011. Their manes wore dust like frost. A horse's brass pole had finger streaks wiped clean to shine, and a lip-shaped fog oval at child height that dried while I stared. In the anchor store's dark, the mannequins were silhouettes against deeper dark. One wore a dress in the display from spring, a season that doesn't visit here. As I turned away, the glass breathed a circle at face height very close to mine, and the mannequin's reflection was looking down at my hand, though the plastic head in the room stayed forward. When I tested it with a tiny wave, the reflector raised its hand late. At 10:37, the service corridor lights flipped yellow and held. My office door at the end clicked. The handle turned left, right, centered, decided, and then settled as if someone with good manners chose not to come in. On my desk, the stack of lost and found slips sighed and tilted, and a single paper slid free. A report from 2009 in a hand not mine. Child found left of fountain. No follow-up attached. The concourse air grew heavy across my chest, the weight of a backpack I don't wear. From the second floor rail, a smooth drag sound moved toward me like a hand on metal. When I glanced up in reflex, I saw a small bare footprint in the dust on the handrail. toes spread too evenly to be human. Another print appeared a foot away without marks between. At 10:51, the carousel mirrors flashed a tired yellow light. In one, my face was wrong, eyes wider, mouth just about to speak. A second face leaned into the edge of the mirror, not looking at me but at where my shoulder would be if I stood a little to the left. The next mirror over showed the concourse from a foot higher than my head, and in that angle, the mannequins in the anchor storefront stood closer to the glass. The morning crew laughed until I showed them the dust. Heel drags in arcs across tile, a ring of wet, dried to salt around a fountain with no water, and a child's handprint on my office door at a height no child is allowed to reach at night. I still walk the loop. Sometimes the carousel plays that one bar and stops, and the escalator sighs like a throat teaching itself to swallow. The pool was closed and dead calm. Then a ripple started in the deep end with no one moving, and wet footprints climbed the ladder from a surface that hadn't broken. I'm Penny. The Rembrandt Hotel keeps the indoor pool as a selling point. Winter makes it a cave that smells like lilies and chlorine. The power failed at 11:12. Underwater lights stayed off. Deck lamps held a dull yellow like timid eyes. At 11:18, a perfect ring formed in the deep end. No drip, no touch, just a ring blooming outward. It reached the tiles and ran up the walls in damp veins where water couldn't climb. The clock above the lifeguard stand ticked back 1 second and stayed. I walked the deck. Cold trailed my ankles like a cat. The stainless ladder chilled my palm in 2 spots, not 3, as if hands had just lifted off. A wet handprint rose on the glass of the pump room door backwards so I could read the whorls. When I wiped it, 5 ovals appeared lower, then slid down, then stopped like someone learning to stand. A towel on the rack unfurled and lay itself lengthwise along the deck as if a body reclined under it. The towels on either side tilted toward that one and held. When I lifted it, the tile beneath was bone warm, not pool warm, and my fingers came away smelling like river rock, not chlorine. At 11:27, a set of wet footprints climbed the ladder from the deep end, appearing one by one on metal, then tile. Heels faint, toes clear, water purling down from nowhere above. I looked at the surface. The pool had not broken. No ripple touched the ladder feet. The prints led to the diving board. The board bent and released as if a person had tested their weight there and decided against it. The "No Lifeguard" sign fogged on the underside of its acrylic. "Don't" cleared letter by letter backward and dried to nothing. A second ring began in the middle water and reached the edge with a whisper that wasn't a splash but sounds like the syllable you make when someone puts a cold hand on your neck. The room grew taller, the way fear makes ceilings back away. In the window glass, my reflection showed me standing very still. A second person stood behind me, head level with mine but too long in the jaw. Chest not quite where a chest should be. Their hand lifted an instant before mine to greet the glass. At 11:39, the deck tilted a fraction under my shoes, exactly the way it feels when a big person climbs out of the water on the far side. The lifeguard chair creaked a long, careful creak, and then stilled. I said, "Please don't," because that is what you say when mercy and manners grab the wheel. The underwater lights flashed once, weak yellow, and in that beat, I saw a shape standing on the pool floor, facing me, not distorted by refraction at all. By morning, the board's grit had a pair of clean ovals where toes would grip. The towel I folded lay itself back down when I turned away, and the pump room glass wore 5 pale marks in an arc at the height of a face that presses into windows to be sure you see. I keep the deck dry now. Sometimes the ladder drips on its own, slow. I like something patient is already halfway up. The candle shop's security footage shows every flame snuff out at once, and one wick still glowing blue where no candle sat. I'm Mara. I run the night inventory at Wren & Wax on Main. Rows of glass jars, soy blends, names like Evening Orchard and Coastal Memory. Smells that mean comfort. The outage killed the fragrance fans. The air went still enough to hear the wax cool. At 9:18, a candle flared on its own. I hadn't lit any. It was the lake house scent, the one discontinued after the owner drowned. The flame burned wrong, blue at the base, thin as a sewing needle, and bent toward me like a finger saying, "Come here." I blew it out. The smoke rose straight, no draft. Then another candle 3 shelves away lit, then another, a dotted line forming a path down the aisle. When I followed, each went out behind me, one by one, whisper quiet. The last jar on the bottom shelf wasn't labeled. Inside the glass, the wax was perfectly smooth except for a thumbprint pressed dead center. The wick twitched, though no air moved, then stood upright again. The candle beside it began to melt, only one, pooling clear liquid that slid across the shelf and dripped upward into the jar above. I stepped back. My elbow brushed a hanging sign. It spun slow and stopped facing the storage door. Behind it, the temperature dropped, soft but deliberate. I caught my reflection in the glass window of a display case. My mouth was moving, though I hadn't said a word. The reflection whispered smoke. No sound. At 9:32, the radio in the office clicked on. It played a recording of our customer greeting. "Welcome to Wren & Wax," except the voice said my name instead of the store's. I turned it off. It clicked itself on again and whispered, "Stay till close." The air smelled like burnt cedar, one of ours, but every jar lid was sealed. I shut the breaker. The wicks still glowed faintly in their jars, phosphor blue, pulsing. On the counter, a lighter rolled to the edge and stopped. When I touched it, the metal was cold enough to hurt. The shelves hummed under my fingers, a sound between breath and word. By morning, we found soot rings on 6 jars forming a circle, and one unmarked candle sitting where there hadn't been one before, wax fingerprint pressed deep. The glass smells like river water now, not wax. I keep that one in a metal box. Sometimes it taps twice from inside like it wants to breathe. The swing on the porch moves only when nobody's looking, and the cushions come back damp, even on dry nights. I'm Eli, maintenance at the Shady Pines Rest Home. Half the residents call it the waiting room for heaven. Maybe they're right. Power died at midnight. Moonlight did the rest. I checked the east porch, 5 rocking chairs, 1 swing. The swing was moving, small, rhythmic. Thought, draft. Then I noticed the lace curtains inside the windows hung perfectly still. On the porch table lay a deck of cards from the rec room. The top card turned itself over. Queen of Hearts. The air smelled faintly sweet, the way it does after morphine. From the dark garden, something clicked, like footsteps on gravel, then stopping just shy of sight. I said out loud, "You need help?" because manners live longer than people. The swing slowed, then stopped mid-motion, boards creaking as if held. I looked under it, dry wood, no wind. Inside, Nurse Lorna slept in her chair by the nurse's desk. The monitor above her head showed static, except one line of green pulse, steady, belonging to no patient. The name field read porch. At 12:16, that same Queen of Hearts slid off the porch table and landed face down. When I picked it up, the back was damp, wet patch shaped like fingertips. From the hall behind me, a call bell rang. The panel light read room 112. That room's been empty 2 years. I still went. The bed in 112 was made tight. The call cord lay coiled, undisturbed. On the pillow, an indentation formed, as if a head settled. The oxygen line on the wall hissed twice and stopped, the sound identical to a sigh. Back on the porch, both cushions were soaked through, dripping to the floorboards. The swing now faced the door, turned in, not out. I swear the pattern of the drip matched a heartbeat. By dawn, everything dried except for the prints on the rail, bare fingers, not mine, leading down into the yard. They stopped at the garden gate and pointed up toward the porch. We fenced it off. Doesn't matter. Every night the porch light flickers once at 12:16, and the swing sways 3 times. Someone's shift isn't over. The motel sign says vacancy every night, but I'm the only one who works here, and every key on the board keeps moving back to occupied. I'm Drew, the Valley Pines Inn, 3 miles off the highway. The kind of place where ghosts should at least tip. At 11:02, the camera monitor blinked from black to gray. Room 7's door was open. No one had checked in since August. I walked the breezeway, dust smell, crickets trying too hard. Room 7's key hung missing, hook swinging. Inside, lights dead, bedspread smooth. Bathroom door half shut like someone wanted privacy but not enough to close it. The mirror over the sink was fogged, though the air was cold. I wiped a circle. A handprint pressed from the other side matched my motion in reverse. When I stepped back, water dripped, steady, into an empty tub. I shut off the valve. The drip kept time with my heartbeat, slow and rude. Back at the desk, room 7's key was on the hook again. The tag was wet, string limp, metal warm. The ledger below it now showed check-in 11:02 p.m. Guest still here, written in block letters. At 11:28, room 3's TV flashed on. White snow, low volume. A shape crossed the static, tall, bent at the waist, moving toward the lens. I pulled the plug. Static remained. The sound rose to a whisper just clear enough to make out a word. Stay. Down the hall, every door latch clicked once in order, left to right, like a slow hand clapping. The carpet shifted underfoot as if air were trying to breathe through it. I left my phone recording on the counter. When I listened later, my own voice whispered, "Room 7, don't open," though I never said it. By morning, the logbook showed 5 rooms checked in, all signed Drew. The signatures aren't mine, but close, each loop smaller, each date 1 day ahead. I still take bookings. Sometimes when I reach for the keys, they're already gone, and a room light is on by itself. Soft yellow, welcoming. The boardroom door is closed in the security clip, and my reflection walks past it before I do. I'm Mo, night cleaner in the Linden and Finch Tower, 30 stories of glass that blacks out like a lake when the grid goes. Generators keep a thin stripe of light down the halls. Everything else listens. I start on 27 because lawyers leave crumbs of paper like molted skin. When the outage hit, the exit signs breathed green and held. The conference room had a wall of windows into the city. Now it was only my face and the office behind me, a long bright painting of a room that wasn't bright anymore. The first wrong thing was a swivel chair turning once on its own. I blamed the AC, then remembered the AC died. The chair faced the glass as if to admire the view of nothing. I went to straighten it and felt a patch of air that was warmer than my hand, exactly shoulder wide, lingering like somebody had just been there, warmth with edges. The glass fogged in an oval at eye height. I wiped it. Another oval wiped from the outside at the same speed, then kept going past where my sleeve had stopped, as if another arm finished the job. When I stepped back, a fingertip drew a single neat line through the fog from top to bottom, slow enough for me to walk with it using my breath. Down the bullpen lane, paper clips trembled in their cups as if a voice hummed at them. On the copy room door, 5 long skin smears curved at elbow height, thumb too far down, someone steadying themselves where no one had been. The copier tray slid out 3 inches and rested like a drawer that wanted to be noticed. At 12:19, the elevator chimed. No car should run during an outage, but the door opened to 27M, not a real floor, revealing only black. A breath of air came from that black, cool and damp like concrete that remembers rain. I told myself pressure equalization and kept my eyes where I wanted them to be. A moment later, my cart rolled 6 inches without slope, mop handle angling toward the boardroom. I heard 3 gentle knocks, not on the door but through the glass, knuckles from the far side of the view. In the reflection, I saw myself hesitate and a second me already standing in the room, hand flat to the far window, head tilted as if listening to something outside the glass that isn't sky. I swiped my badge to open the boardroom, though nobody was around to scold me. The latch answered soft and friendly. Inside, the carpet carried a wet footprint at the far end, heel faint, toes distinct, as if weight didn't like to settle. It tracked to the table and stopped beside my chair, the head seat, and the leather there bowed an inch and released like someone stood without legs. The city was a mirror. In it, a shape leaned into the window from the night side and left 5 ovals of clarity, temples and mouth, like breath from outside trying to get in. My reflection felt wrong. Jaw a shade too long, eyes a touch too wide. And when I raised my hand, the mirror me raised. There's a heartbeat late. The oval on the glass moved toward my palm to meet it. I backed out and pressed the closed door button for an elevator that was only pretending it could help me. It opened again to 27M, that label glowing soft yellow as if tired. In the black beyond, a single red exit dot blinked and went still, as if an eye got embarrassed. The hallway behind me warmed at my spine like someone standing nearer than you allow. The copy tray slid home with a polite click, which somehow felt worse. At dawn, the boardroom window held 5 faint skin smears in an arc you could only see when the sun angled right. The chair I sit in to eat my sandwich had a second warm patch exactly where my shoulder would rest if I were left-handed, which I'm not. I clean faster now. Sometimes the elevator comes anyway and waits with its mouth open to a floor the building doesn't admit exists. The mirror in the antique shop shows what's in the room, but the clock behind your reflection runs backward. I'm Helen. My mind still well antiques on weekends. We leave one light on overnight for charm. That night the power failed and the charm started breathing. At 10:44, a floorboard popped under the Persian rug, though I hadn't moved. The grandfather clock stopped mid-tick. In the mirror across the room, its pendulum kept swinging backward, steady, calm. I tested it with my phone light. Reflected pendulum right to left. Real pendulum dead still. A porcelain doll in the display tipped forward. The glass didn't break. It simply pressed outward, like the air had thickened and held it in place. On the mirror's surface, a thin fog drew the outline of my face, but older, lined, deeper, mouth open. At 10:52, something tapped from the inside of the glass, fingertip to fingertip. The mirror trembled like it was soft flesh. My reflection smiled, though I didn't. Teeth too many by one. I threw the sheet over it. The sheet sucked tight, pulled inward like breath, and then hung limp again. In the dark, I heard the cash register ding and open. When I got there, one coin rested in the tray. A silver quarter dated 1901, the year the shop was built. The tag string around it had my name written in fountain pen ink. At 11:03, the covered mirror began to glow faint blue beneath the sheet. Shadows moved across it, slow, circular, like people walking in another room. When I lifted a corner, the mirror showed the shop as it would look at dawn, light through windows and me, not there. The pendulum behind my reflection still swung, backward, faster now. I backed away. My reflection did not. It stayed at the glass, leaning forward until its forehead pressed it. When I turned off my light, the glow pulsed once like a heartbeat, then faded. The next day, the mirror's surface bore 5 faint, oily prints at head height. Mine, but mirrored wrong, thumbs outward. We sold it last month. The buyer returned it the same night, mirror covered, wouldn't say why. It still sits in back. Every so often, the cloth lifts at the bottom like it's breathing under there.